Coogs house. The Houston Cougars did it. They've extended Kelvin Sampson through 2029. The GOAT is coming back for a long time, but what's that mean for the Cougs now?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. Whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. If you're making us first listen each and every day as the everydayer you are. If you want to join the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below what your favorite snack at the ballpark is. Are you a nachos person, a popcorn person, a hot dog person, or are you just more of a beverages person? Tell us, please. We're also following Houston Cougar baseball with some live reactions right now as things are happening, so make sure you check that out as well. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. But today, I want to spend some time talking in this episode about basketball and a little bit about the conference in football. First, we're going to start with Kelvin Sampson getting extended. Then I'll talk about Cenac and Isiah Harwell getting recognized nationally and internationally. And yes, last but not least, we will touch on that BYU story and how it impacts Houston. Okay, so Kelvin Sampson extended. The details we've got that he's extended through the 2028-2029 season. That is a hefty 4 more years. People were worried about him as a man in his 60s, how much longer he wanted to do this. Now he has a lot of energy in his 60s, and if I am moving in that together and doing all the things like Kelvin Sampson is doing when I'm that age, I'm going to be a very happy man. Because frankly, there's days now where I'm in my 30s and I don't feel quite like that, if I'm being really honest. But there were people wondering like how close the guy was to retiring, hanging it up. We know his son, Kellen, is next in line to take over the program. Kellen's been named the coach in waiting, both officially and unofficially, for a while now. And so you're wondering when it's going to get handed off. Kellen has done the bulk of the recruiting. Houston has the #1 class in 2025. Stands to reason that Kellen did do a big chunk of that recruiting. It stands to reason that he would continue to have that kind of success in the future. Kellen works with the forwards in the front court. Kellen handles a lot of things on the program. So at some point, you got to think they hand it off. You also had Quantus White, one of Kelvin's favorite assistants, take a head coaching job. Kelvin is ecstatic for him. I don't mean that they're upset about it, but that would be another easy way to hit the exit button here. Micah Conham, who is a Houston area guy and that Kelvin knows from many, many moons ago when they overlapped some in San Antonio, is not the same kind of player for Sampson that Quantus was, right? And so that replacement wasn't quite one-to-one. It stands to reason that people wondered, like, what would come next? Now, I will say that Kelvin extending his career at Houston for the next 4 years, if they get, over 25 wins a season, he's got a real shot at being in the top 5 in terms of all-time wins as a college basketball coach. Even with 20 wins, he'll be inside the top 10 very soon. 20 wins a season, I should say, but in the top 10 very soon. At Houston, he's been to 7 straight NCAA tournaments. He's had a pair of Final Fours, 6 straight conference titles, 10 straight 21 seasons. Really, really impressive resume just in his time at Houston. Never mind the extensive time at Washington State and Oklahoma and Indiana before that. And so I say all that to say that the guy can hang it up and go to the Hall of Fame whenever he wants, right? Like truthfully, just reviving the Houston Cougar program and getting it to where it is a Hall of Fame career in and of itself. But then you factor in everything else. If the guy said, hey, just kidding, I got to put the whistle up and left tomorrow, he's a Hall of Famer, right? That's just the way that is. And that extended to 2029, I think is interesting because it adds to this window of like, okay, getting Sampson that first title is important. I feel like, again, you were 65 seconds away from it a year ago or just a month ago. God, that feels so long ago. I don't want to think about that anymore. You were 65 seconds away from it then, right? You return a large chunk of this team. If Miles Uzan returns, returning 4 of the 8-man rotation. It's pretty good. I guess kind of 3 anyway of the 8-man rotation. So you feel good about that. It's also 3 starters, right? And Uzan and Sharp and Tugler, right? On top of that, you bring in one of the top transfers in Pop Isaacs to replace LJ Cryer at that 2-guard spot. Seems big, seems important. And on top of that, you bring in the number 1 recruiting class in America in 2025 with 3 5-star kids. I'm telling you that Bryce kid, he's going to be a hidden gem. Pay attention to that name. And so with all of that, it stands to reason that 2025-6 is going to be a big year for the program as well. But as you're reaching out, we mentioned in an earlier episode this week that he was in Memphis and in Omaha and watching these high-level AAU kids in classes of 2026s and 2027s and doing recruiting. It solidifies his stance as a recruiter to have on contract, on the books. I will be at Houston at least this long, right? He has the right to retire whenever he wants to, and he has the Hall of Fame career to do so. But I think it really does help build the longevity of the program with that date being a little further out, right? It also, I think, kind of dispels the idea, and I bluntly had kind of thought it made some sense that he might have hung it up and retired had they won the title last month. I don't think that winning a title is going to end his career. I think he's probably trying to get a couple here before the end, and he's got the program set up to do it. He continues to dominate the Big 12, and while some of those wins are by the skin of your teeth, he's built a culture and is known now as the culture builder that wins those games by the skin of their teeth. That's kind of their thing. And anyway, it's interesting to see it all coming together. As contract details come out, what I'm going to be paying attention to, and what I hope you are as well, what kind of language they've got around the handing over of the program to Kellen, right? Can he hand it over before 2029? Can he hand it over before 2029 and be sure that Kellen gets it? Can he hand it over in 2029 and be sure that Kellen gets it? I think that'll all be yes, but we shall see, right? What do the contracts look like for his assistants? We know he's done this before where he's taken a minute to talk about the contract extension with administration to be sure that his assistants get treated fairly, correctly. He feels very paternalistic about his assistant coaches, not just because his son is one of them, but he's had quotes before about how he hires his guys and people that he feels something to take care of, because some sort of an honor to take care of, right? Because if he won't hire guys that played for him or coached for him elsewhere, why would he expect anyone else to, right? So he wants to make sure those guys are taken care of. That makes sense. I want to see how they do that and what kind of stipulations they got in there on that. He's asked for things before that big blue blood programs have, like private jets and or at least access to one and things like that. And I think some people initially scoffed, but then when I tell you, well, last weekend he was bouncing between recruiting tournaments, big time AAU tournaments in Memphis and Cincinnati and Omaha, and he was kind of 3-wheel going all the way around. It makes some sense that he needs to be able to get to where he's getting when he needs to get there, right? Having to find commercial flights for that could be really, really challenging, to say the least. And so I think that, what are those kinds of perks in his contract? Reports are that he is, as far as the dollar amount goes, remaining in that top portion of coaches in all of college basketball. That's somewhere, I'd imagine, around the $6 to $7 million range. We'll see that when the contract comes out. As a public school, it will come out, right? And so we'll see all of those details unfold as more comes to light. We'll be talking about those as they hit, especially if there are any particular interesting ones here at Locked on Coogs. But there's something particularly interesting to me about the 2025-26 roster. That is Isiah Harwell and Chris Cenac both receiving a international honor of sorts recently. I want to talk about this some in the next segment, but first, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because the NBA playoffs are in full swing. Man, oh man, when you've got the Pacers hitting buzzer beaters in the Madison Square Garden, it feels like the playoffs are in full swing. Highlight performances, last-second shots, big-time plays, all happening all the time. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game. Before tip-off, live, player props, performance trends, same-game parlays, whatever. Play smart, win big with FanDuel. You get $200 back and a bonus bet if that first $5 bet hits. I love how simple and intuitive the app is, so make sure you go check that out. If you're new to FanDuel, it's a perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Coogs here, talking Houston Cougars, talking class of 2020, high school class of 2025. The top ranked class in America belongs to the Houston Cougars. And that is not only because of, but certainly in large part because Isiah Harwell, the 6'6" guard / wing out of Wasatch Academy, and Chris Cenac, the 6'10", 6'11", depending on the publication, center out of Link Academy, are both signed to come to Houston. And this week, they were both honored and chosen to be in the Team USA U19 training camp. That's about 32 players. I think 32 players, but it might be 33 invites, but one of them was hurt, to participate in that camp this year. This ultimately does get you in the system to at some point have a chance to play for Team USA in like an Olympic setting, right? This is a FIBA kind of ordeal, and the U19 team has had some real star talent on it. Houston has not bluntly had a whole lot of players that make this far, right? And that's impressive. And we think about all of the great basketball that come through the University of Houston, generation after generation. Obviously, Team USA has been organized differently at different times and all of that, but this is the first time we had two of these guys here, right? This is a big deal. Ultimately, they're going to whittle down that total of 30. I guess there are 33 invites out. Even one guy's hurt. 32 guys healthy enter camp on June 14th. And then they will go straight to the games in Australia from camp on June 28th. Those games end on August 6th. Sorry, not Australia, in Switzerland. They're in Australia in 2023. I had my dates wrong. But they're going from 14th to 28th. They're taking the team on the 28th straight to Switzerland, and they'll play through. If they win the championship, which I assume USA will have a good shot to do, that would be August 6th. And so a couple things there. One, incredibly flattering that Cenac and Harwell are there. I should point out that Houston targets in the 2026 class, Christian Collins, Caleb Holt, amongst a couple others, but those two guys in particular are also there. So theoretically, once commitments happen, you could have 3 or 4 Cougs in this group. I would also point out that this is typically guys that end up in the lottery. And I don't mean that in like eventually end up in the lottery. I mean like pretty quickly end up in the lottery. Like the 2023 Team USA U19 team, the last time this thing played, has 3 guys from that team that are projected to be in the 2025 NBA lottery, NBA draft lottery. They also had, I think, 2 guys from last year's NBA draft lottery. That's from the team itself. So of the 12 guys that made the roster, 5 of them ended up being lottery picks in the following 2 years, right? In 2021, 6 of the 12 players are currently in the NBA. 3 are currently in the G League. 1 is currently in college still, and 1 is entering this offseason's draft, right? So again, of the 12 players, that's very quickly 11 that are still playing at a Division I or higher level here in the States. The 2019 team was particularly special with 8 guys drafted in the lottery in either 2020 or 2021, as well as 1 other non-lottery pick in the NBA. Another 2 guys in the G League, and another guy in Europe from that team. The top 5 picks of the 2021 NBA draft were all on the 2019 U19 team for Team USA. Pretty crazy, right? 2017, similar kind of numbers. And what I'm getting at here is for Harwell and Cenac, I think there are a lot of people like, well, Houston's not trying to do the one and done thing, and Jarris Walker was a one-off, and da-da-da-da-da. But this is yet another measurement that feels indicative that, like, these guys, Isiah Harwell and Chris Cenac, have tremendous talent and upside. And they chose to come be coached by Kelvin Sampson and be a part of Houston culture. They signed up for it, and they know what they signed up for. However, they may not be around that long because they are just that talented. And as Houston makes this move into being a consistent contender for the Final Four for a national championship, right? Again, 2 Final Fours in the last 5 years. Is it 7 straight tournaments, 6 straight Sweet 16s. I mean, this team is that kind of competitive. You're entering an echelon where you're going to kind of have a couple guys every year or every other year that are very short stays before going to the league. And that's okay. It doesn't mean that they are any less Cougars, anything like that. I think there's a big pull from an older fan base, an old school minded fan base, maybe it's a better way to put it, that doesn't like that. And that doesn't think that's the way the program should go. But I feel adamantly that if you gave me a team of 12 Jarris Walkers, I could figure out how to win a lot of basketball games, right? And so I guess the way I see it as is it's about having a balance. It's about having Harwell, Cenac, and Caleb Holt. Let's say 3 guys, right? And then you have Manuel Sharps, Milos Uzans, and then you have JoJo Tugglers, and those guys around it, having a combination of both, right, I think is important for winning. I point out when Houston beat Duke, Houston made Duke look like a bunch of freshmen out there playing in the last 10 minutes of the game. And they were a lot of freshmen out there playing in the last 10 minutes of the game, right? You don't want all freshmen. But I do think, while that team has 4 guys that are going to get drafted in the top 14 or something like that, I do think that having that top end talent coming through your program year in, year out, and then ultimately making a quick jump to the league when it's time, is a sign of a program that attracts very talented players. And I that's just where Houston is, right? I also think that in a more immediate term, if Cenac and Harwell make the team, there's a very good chance they do. It's not set in stone, but there's a very good chance they do. They're certainly talented enough to play. That essentially means that from June 14th to August 6th, they're not in the program. They're not in the Houston Cougar program, right? They're off competing for the country, which is awesome. Truly an honor. Play for the red, white, and blue, right? I'm not trying to discredit that at all, but this is Locked On Cougs, not Locked On USA Basketball. So the way this impacts the Cougs is 2 guys that will, I think Cenac will start, and Isiah Harwell, I think, is going to be like the first guard off the bench, maybe second to Mercy Miller. We'll see. We'll see what Chase McCarty fits in, right? 2 guys are going to be very important to your rotation next year, are going to miss June and July. We've heard Sampson talk about how important June and July are for his program, how one of the things he liked about coming back to college basketball is now your season, air quotes, starts June 1st, where it used to start like October 15th, right? Missing those 2 months while they're representing the country and doing cool things will likely mean that they start their season a little behind. That's okay. We saw last year's team go 4-3 in November, turn around, and like I believe it was from December 1st to the end of the year, they lost a total of 2 games. 2 by a combined 3 points. Like, they can figure out a way to turn the season around just because of bad November. But I'm preemptively telling you now, do not freak out when Isiah Harwell and Chris Cenac, if they make Team USA this summer, have trouble gelling into the roster in November. It almost feels inevitable. And that does not mean the team is not working. That does not mean the freshmen are not good. That does not mean the team is not a top 5 team in America. It just means that they're still working the kinks out. And it's going to happen. It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Okay. Speaking of something that is going to be fine, something that's not going to be fine is what's happening in Provo, Utah right now. And I know this is Locked on Cougs, not Locked on Cougars, but I do want to talk about that briefly. And as weird as it is to try and make that about sports and football, talk about how that is going to impact Houston a little bit. But first, Locked on Cougs host Parker Ainsworth here, and a big story in the conference on Wednesday, May 21st, came out of Provo, Utah, when KSL wrote an article that had accusations of sexual assault by the BYU quarterback, Jake Retzlaff. Jake Retzlaff came to fame and notoriety of sorts last year as the, quote, BY Jew. They were marketing it like that, where he was notably not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it's allegations, I should point that out first. And we're going to, I think, for a brief moment, talk about how this impacts things like football programs and schools and the Big 12 and da-da-da-da-da. Before we get into any of that, I should stress that while these allegations are still present allegations, and America is a country you're innocent until proven guilty, at the core of this, someone was, hurt forever in a way that I don't think is worth losing sight of. Jane Doe, right? She's choosing to remain anonymous, had her life altered in irreversible way in November 2023. That's the allegation, I should say. And initially didn't want to come forward and say back then when she went to the hospital and submitted DNA to a rape kit and those kinds of things, she didn't want to say who it was for anonymity's sake and didn't want to go through that whole ordeal. When approached by police recently, because there were allegations. She did say there was a football player on the BYU team, I think, when describing how big the person was as far as like stature and physical nature, whatever, right? The police officers said, hey, we have other allegations about a football player, and that's when it came out that this was allegations towards Jake Retzlaff. The civil case pending, I guess, is part of the deal here. And look, I'm not going to act like a legal expert, and I'm continuing to use things like allegations and stuff like that, right? I will say that the interesting thing about this, as far as the University of Houston and the Big 12 are concerned, which is, again, not the biggest part of this, but is a part of this, and this is Locked on Coogs, is the football side of this being BYU. The BYU of this all makes this really complicated, because when these kind of things happen, and they unfortunately happen far too often in athletics, you typically have a story of a woman saying she did not consent and an athlete or a person or a man saying that they did consent. And that becomes back and forth, and evidence to who could or couldn't or who did or didn't or whatever becomes the unfortunate and ugly part of the court case, the civil case, that is, right? And then the criminal case, and if there is one of those and all that. But with BYU, that doesn't matter, because they have this very strict, very religious-based code of conduct, the honor code, right, at BYU, where any of this happening, primarily for Jake Retzlaff, is grounds to be dismissed from school. And so I don't know what his legal defense will be in the civil case. I have no idea. His lawyer has spoken out already. Jake Hatch of Locked On BYU Cougars has pointed this out. And for what it's worth, Jake Hatch is on the scene in Salt Lake and Provo and does a lot of coverage of the program. And he said that they were all blindsided by this as well. But the lawyer, the legal team representing Jake Retzlaff, says that BYU became aware today that a civil lawsuit involving Jake Retzlaff has been filed this morning. The university takes any allegation very seriously, following all processes and guidelines mandated by Title IX. Due to federal and university privacy laws, practices for students, the university will not be able to provide additional comment. Right? That's the official statement from the Jake Retzlaff side of things. And to be fair, they shouldn't have to provide. They shouldn't provide more than they have to, right? But if the DNA in the kit that the woman apparently took, Jane Doe apparently took the test back when this happened, November of 2023, if it has his DNA in it, he's almost certainly kicked out of school. There's precedent for this. There was the Jimmer Fredette run in the NCAA basketball tournament, right? Like that. This would not be the first time that an athlete was kicked out of school amidst something for violating that code, and it really dramatically shapes this conference's perception if BYU is not returning as a good football team. Not that that's the biggest thing here, but it does. It also means there will probably be some shuffling. Assuming, innocent proven guilty, schools that don't have that kind of an honor code might be quick to snatch up a Jake Retzlaff. They might, if he hits the transfer portal or is no longer enrolled in BYU, right? BYU has invested heavily in having a good season this year. They really are going to put a lot on the quarterback's shoulders. Did they do something crazy different now if it's no longer Jake Retzlaff? This is about to be weird and wonky and odd, and it's all in the same conference that Houston exists in. And so Houston finds themselves kind of in this like, well, what's the world around us look like kind of a moment. And part of this is because BYU is such a unique institution with, frankly, a being rebuilt athletic program. Right. And so more on this will come out and more on this will continue to roll out, and allegations will hit, court cases will become more of decision kind of things. Right. And they are still presently allegations. That does not mean I think we should look past the fact that, again, this young woman's life was severely impacted. Again, and allegations, I think we also need to balance that with they are still just allegations. And so we have to kind of have that going back and forth in our head at all times. I want to recommend for following these cases, I want to say to go follow Jake Hatch and Locked on BYU Cougars. I think he handled the initial reporting incredibly professionally with great balance and being fair to all parties involved. I can tell you right now, there's not a person with the ear to the ground better than Jake at doing these kinds of things. Jake is a consummate professional, and he understands the BYU honor code as both a member of the faith and an alumni of that school. And he understands kind of the way the school is the face of that. And so as this hits the conference and the sports sides of things, which it does trickle and ripple into that, I want to push that you go see and watch and listen to Jake Hatch on these kinds of things over at Locked on BYU Cougars, just because I think he's doing it really well. I do think this is important, and I want to make sure that those kind of things come together. So that's my 2 cents on that. Some dialogue on social media about it and how that's going to impact the conference. So I didn't want to address it. And we might not address it again on Locked on Coogs because of the nature of this thing. And frankly, as icky and gross as it gets and all that. But if it does in other ways ripple into the Houston Cougars, we'll be hitting it. We're talking about all things Houston Cougar basketball, baseball, football, whatever's going on campus as well, each and every day here at Locked on Coogs. Subscribe, hit the bell, and we're live. Locked on Coogs, primarily Locked on Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Coogs.